Okay, so get this. I was scrolling through medical news today, as one does, and
Hmm.
I nearly choked on my coffee when I saw this headline. It says ADHD linked to astonishing reduction in life expectancy. Astonishing's putting it mildly. We're talking potentially like 8.64 years shorter lifespans for women and 6.78 years for men.
Wow,
Yeah, pretty crazy.
that's a huge difference.
Yeah, and when you hear ADHD, you kind of think, oh, it's just about focusing. But as we're going to find out today in this deep dive, it's way more than that.
Yeah, it really. And what's interesting is that reduced lifespan isn't like a direct result of having ADHD. It's more like this complicated mix of things that can go along with it. That's what this January 2025 article really digs into. It's kind of like a ripple effect, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah, like a pebble in a pond. So this Medical News Today article is based on a study. It was published in the British Journal of Psychiatry. And the researchers, they compared over 30,000 adults with ADHD to a group without it. They matched them for like age and sex and other things, just to make sure it was a fair comparison. And what they found was pretty eye-opening.
Yeah, for sure. People with ADHD were way more likely to have all sorts of conditions, like diabetes, high blood pressure, epilepsy, even depression. We're not talking about one or two things here. They were more likely to be diagnosed with all 13 of the medical conditions in the study.
Whoa, 13 out of 13. That's a huge red flag.
Yeah.
The article quotes a psychiatrist, Dr. Beata Lewis. She talks about how ADHD can create this cascade of challenges. She says difficulties with like keeping a job can lead to financial stress, which then you can't afford health care or healthy food or even have time for exercise or hobbies. It's like one thing leads to another and another and
Yeah.
another.
Yeah, it's like a domino effect. It really hits both your physical and mental well-being. Totally. And that leads us to something Dr. Michelle Dees brought up in the article. She talks about cohesive systems and interventions. What she means is we need a more integrated approach where mental and physical health care work together, along with social support.
Right. It's not just about medication. It's about holistic support.
Mm.
We need to recognize that all these things are connected.
Yeah, that makes total sense. And this whole idea of early intervention really stood out to me. Another expert in the article, Dr. Barry K. Herman, he says that early diagnosis and treatment can really help reduce the potential risks of ADHD.
Absolutely. If we can catch it early and give people the right support, we can hopefully prevent some of these negative outcomes down the line. It's all about empowering people with ADHD to live healthier and more fulfilling lives.
That's such a good point. It makes me wonder, what are some of the challenges people with ADHD face that contribute to this ripple effect? Is it just the difficulty focusing, or is there more to it?
Oh, there's definitely more to it than just focus. One big thing is impulsivity. That's something that often comes with ADHD.
Right, I remember reading about that. But how does that tie into the big picture of health and well-being?
Well, Dr. Dees points out that impulsivity can sometimes lead to riskier behaviors, and those behaviors can impact long-term health. Think about things like impulsive spending or substance use, even reckless driving. You know these behaviors. They might not be directly caused by ADHD, but they can be influenced by it, and they can have serious consequences.
Wow, I never thought of it like that. That's really eye-opening. So we're seeing this link between ADHD and a shorter lifespan isn't direct. But what are the actual mechanisms at play? Let's dig a little deeper into Dr. Lewis's idea of the ripple effect.
Okay, so one way to think about it is that ADHD can make it hard to navigate the world around us. For example, a lot of people with ADHD have trouble with executive functioning skills, like planning, organization, time management. These skills are super important for success in school, at work, even just managing everyday life.
Yeah, that makes sense. I can see how those challenges could lead to stress and anxiety, which would then affect your health over time. But hold on, wouldn't early diagnosis also mean we need more awareness and understanding of ADHD among teachers and parents? How can we make sure they know how to spot the signs and provide support?
You're absolutely right. Early intervention needs a multi-pronged approach. We need to educate not just healthcare professionals, but also teachers, parents, and really society as a whole. The more we understand about ADHD, the better equipped we'll be to support those who have it.
Okay, so we're starting to see how this whole pebble in the pond thing really plays out. But let's get even more specific. What are some of those unmet support needs that the article mentioned, and what can we do to address them?
Well, it's a complex issue for sure, and it can look different depending on where you live. This particular study focused on the UK, and it seems like there's a big gap in specialized support for adults with ADHD there.
So even if someone is diagnosed, they might not have access to the resources and help they need. That's pretty worrying. What kind of support are we talking about here? Is it mainly therapy medication or something else entirely?
It's probably a mix of all of those things, plus things like coaching support groups and maybe even vocational training. Think about it. If you're struggling with work finances, relationships, your physical health, and you're trying to navigate a world that often feels overwhelming, wouldn't you need a solid support system to help you manage all that?
Absolutely. And it sounds like that's what's missing for a lot of people with ADHD. So how can we bridge this gap? Are we talking about more funding for mental health services, better access to specialists, or something completely different?
It's probably a combination of all those things. More funding is super important,
Mm-hmm.
but it's not just about throwing money at the problem. We need to make sure that money is being used effectively to create support networks that are accessible and comprehensive.
Right. It's not just about the quantity of resources. It's about the quality and how easy they are to access. The article also mentioned that people with ADHD are more likely to experience inequality and adversity. It's a pretty strong statement. What kind of inequality are we talking about here?
It can take many forms. Think about underachievement in education, which can happen because of difficulties focusing and learning in traditional school settings. And then that can lead to problems getting a job and achieving financial stability. It's like a cycle of disadvantage.
And let's not forget about the stigma around ADHD. That can create a whole other set of challenges, making it harder to ask for help or even talk about what you're going through.
You're right. Stigma can be a huge barrier to getting support and feeling understood. It's crucial to remember that ADHD is a neurodevelopmental condition. It's not a personal failing.
It's about understanding empathy and active listening. All the experts we've talked about have highlighted the importance of early diagnosis and treatment. But what if someone wasn't diagnosed until they were an adult? Is it too late to benefit from treatment and support? Some of our listeners might be in that exact situation.
It's never too late to seek help and make positive changes. While early intervention is ideal, adults who are newly diagnosed can still see big improvements in their quality of life with the right treatment and support.
That's good to hear. So if you're listening to this and thinking, some of this sounds familiar, it's worth talking to a healthcare professional to get an evaluation. You're not alone, and there is help available. And even if you don't have ADHD yourself, you probably know someone who does.
For sure. Remember, understanding empathy and active listening can go a long way in supporting those around us who are dealing with the complexities of ADHD.
Right. It's about creating a more inclusive and supportive environment where people with ADHD feel seen, heard, and valued for their unique strengths and perspectives. The authors of the study really emphasize the urgent need for change. They frame it as a matter of social justice. It's a reminder that we're all connected, and the well-being of one person affects the well-being of all.
This deep dive has definitely shown us some tough realities, but it's also sparked a sense of hope and empowerment. By understanding all the different factors that contribute to a shorter lifespan for people with ADHD, we can start to create meaningful change.
That's a great way to put it. We've covered a lot already, but there's still so much more to explore. In the next part of our deep dive, we'll focus on what we can do about this. What can we do as individuals and as a society to address this issue?
We'll look at some specific strategies and recommendations from the experts,
Yeah.
giving you the knowledge and tools to make a difference. Stay tuned.
Welcome back. Before we jump into solutions, I think there's something important we should address. We've been talking about, reduced life expectancy in ADHD, and it's pretty heavy stuff. But what about the other side of the coin? What about the strengths and talents that often come with ADHD?
That's a great point. We can't forget that ADHD isn't just about deficits. It's about different ways of thinking and experiencing the world, and that can lead to some amazing strengths.
Exactly. And the article mentioned this too. It highlights how people with ADHD are often super creative. They have this out-of-the-box thinking, a strong sense of justice, and a deep capacity for empathy.
It's true, lots of people with ADHD are full of energy and passion, and they might have this unique ability to hyper-focus on things they're really interested in.
Right. It's like they have this internal drive, and when that drive is channeled effectively, it can lead to incredible achievements. So it's not about fixing ADHD. It's about understanding it, embracing the neurodiversity it represents, and providing the support people need to harness their strengths and navigate the challenges.
I totally agree. And that brings us back to the experts and their recommendations. Dr. Dees, for example, she suggests fostering open communication with people who have ADHD and encouraging healthy lifestyle choices. She also emphasizes advocating for better support systems, like contacting your local representatives, supporting organizations that advocate for mental health, or even just raising awareness in your community.
Those are some really concrete actions. I was reading another article about the power of grassroots movements, and it struck me that even small actions, when a lot of people do them, can create a big ripple effect of change.
Absolutely. Never underestimate the power of speaking up and joining forces with others who share your passion. Dr. Herman says something similar. He highlights the importance of educating ourselves about ADHD, challenging those misconceptions,
Mm.
and celebrating the strengths and talents of people with ADHD.
Right, and he also emphasizes the importance of being a good listener and advocate for people with ADHD, which I think is so crucial. It's not about giving advice or trying to fix things. It's about being present, listening without judgment,
Mm.
and offering support.
Dr. Lewis really drives that point home. She talks about the importance of creating a safe space for open communication. It's about acknowledging the challenges that come with ADHD and being there for our friends and loved ones who are going through those challenges.
It's about empathy, understanding, and meeting people where they are, which,
Mhm.
is something we could all benefit from, whether we have ADHD or not. It's about fostering a culture of acceptance and support.
You're so right. It's about recognizing that everyone has their own strengths and challenges and creating a world where those differences are celebrated, not stigmatized.
This makes me think about the whole nature versus nurture debate. Is it possible that some of the challenges associated with ADHD are actually made worse by environments that aren't designed for neurodiversity? What if we created learning environments that were more flexible and accommodating to different learning styles?
That's a really interesting question. And I think more and more people are recognizing that our traditional systems, like education, healthcare, even the workplace,
Hmm.
they're not always set up in a way that supports neurodiversity.
Right. Imagine a world where instead of trying to fit square pegs into round holes, we embrace the unique shape of each individual and create systems that allow everyone to flourish.
That's a powerful vision.
Mm.
And it's not just about creating more inclusive systems, it's about changing our mindsets.
Mm.
It's about recognizing that neurodiversity is a natural part of being human, not something to be afraid of or try to get rid of.
That's a great point. It's about embracing the full spectrum of human experience, with all its complexity and nuances. Now, I want to go back to something you mentioned earlier about impulsivity and how it can impact health and well-being. Are there specific strategies or interventions that can help people with ADHD manage impulsivity in a way that promotes long-term health?
There definitely are. And this is where a multifaceted approach is really important. Cognitive behavioral therapy, or CBT, for example, can be really helpful in developing coping mechanisms for managing impulsive urges. There are also mindfulness techniques that can help people become more aware of their thoughts and feelings in the moment, giving them the space to make conscious choices.
I've heard a lot about mindfulness lately. It seems like it's becoming a popular tool for managing all sorts of mental and emotional challenges. But how does it work with impulsivity specifically? Is it about learning to resist those urges, or is there more to it?
It's more about cultivating awareness and self-regulation. Imagine you're about to buy something impulsively. With mindfulness, you might pause for a second. Notice that urge, acknowledge it without judging yourself, and then consciously choose whether to act on it or not. It's about creating space between the impulse and the action, so you can make more intentional choices.
That makes a lot of sense. It's like building a pause button into your decision-making process. So it's not about suppressing those impulses completely. It's about learning to manage them in a way that aligns with your values and goals. This deep dive has really highlighted how important it is to understand all the different parts of ADHD and how they can play out in real life. But how do we put this understanding into action? What are some real steps that individuals, families, and communities can take to create a more supportive and inclusive environment for people with ADHD?
That's the big question, isn't it? And the good news is there are lots of answers, big and small. One of the most impactful things we can do is advocate for systemic change. That means pushing for policies that support early diagnosis and treatment, increasing funding for mental health services, and creating more inclusive learning and work environments.
Those are some big picture goals and definitely worth working towards. But what about on a more personal level? What can individuals do to support the people in their lives who have ADHD?
There are so many ways to make a difference. One of the most important is simply to listen with empathy and understanding. Validate their experiences, celebrate their strengths, and offer support without judgment. Education is also crucial. The more we know about ADHD, the better we can support people who have it.
Right. It's about replacing stigma with understanding. Speaking of education, what are some reliable resources where people can learn more about ADHD? Are there specific websites, books, or organizations you would recommend?
Definitely. One great resource is CHADD. That stands for Children and Adults with Attention Deficit Hyperactivity Disorder. They have a ton of information on their website, including research updates, tips for managing ADHD, and resources for finding support groups and professionals. Another good one is the Attention Deficit Disorder Association, or ADDA. They offer similar resources. And they also host webinars and conferences on different ADHD-related topics.
Those are great resources. I'm definitely going to check those out. Something that's been on my mind as we've been talking about the social and emotional aspects of ADHD is the importance of resilience. It's clear that living with ADHD can come with unique challenges. But how can we help people develop the coping skills and inner strength they need to navigate those challenges effectively?
That's a crucial point. Resilience is all about bouncing back from adversity. And it's definitely a skill that can be learned and strengthened. One way to foster resilience is to help people with ADHD identify and embrace their strengths, remind them of their past successes, and encourage them to focus on what they're good at rather than their limitations.
That's so important. It's about building that sense of self-efficacy, the belief that they have the power to overcome obstacles. What about strategies for managing stress and anxiety? We know those can be heightened for people with ADHD. Are there specific techniques that are particularly helpful?
Absolutely. Mindfulness practices like meditation and deep breathing exercises can be incredibly effective in calming the nervous system and lowering stress levels. Physical activity is another great tool. Exercise releases endorphins, which have mood-boosting effects, and it can also be a great way to release pent-up energy.
I've heard that even a short walk in nature can have a big impact on reducing stress and improving overall well-being.
You're totally right. Connecting with nature has been shown to have therapeutic benefits, both physically and mentally, and it's something that's accessible to most people.
It's about finding those little moments of peace and rejuvenation amidst the chaos. This deep dive has really opened my eyes to the complexities of ADHD and the importance of taking a holistic approach to support. It's not just about addressing the symptoms. It's about empowering individuals to live full and meaningful lives, embracing their neurodiversity as a source of strength rather than a limitation.
I couldn't agree more, and I think the key takeaway is that we all have a role to play in creating a more inclusive and supportive world for individuals with ADHD, whether it's advocating for systemic change, educating ourselves and others, or just being a compassionate listener. Every action counts.
It's about moving away from judgment and stigma and towards understanding and acceptance. It's about recognizing that neurodiversity is not a deficit, but a difference that enriches our world.
And remember, it's not just about helping people with ADHD, it's about creating a better world for everyone.
I think that's a perfect place to pause for now. We've covered a lot, from the science of ADHD to the social and emotional aspects, and we've explored a bunch of strategies for support and empowerment.
In the last part of our deep dive, we'll get into even more practical tips and resources, giving you the tools and knowledge to make a real difference in your own life and the lives of those around you. Stay tuned. Welcome back to the final part of our deep dive into ADHD and its impact on lifespan. We've covered a lot exploring the science, the social and emotional aspects, and the importance of taking a holistic approach to support. Now let's shift gears and talk about what we can actually do about this. What can we do as individuals and as a society to create a more inclusive world for people with ADHD?
Something that really struck me from the article was the idea of storytelling. Dr. Herman actually suggests encouraging individuals with ADHD to share their experiences, both the challenges and the triumphs.
That's interesting because a lot of times when we talk about mental health, it's from a clinical or research perspective. But hearing personal stories, those lived experiences can be so powerful.
Right. It really humanizes the issue and helps break down stigma. Dr. Herman believes that by sharing their stories, individuals with ADHD can help others understand the condition better and advocate for change. It's like that saying, shared stories, shared humanity. And it makes me think, some of our listeners might be wondering, okay, I want to be supportive, but where do I start? What are some tangible things people can do in their everyday lives to make a difference?
Well, one simple but effective thing is to educate yourself about ADHD. There's a wealth of information available online and in libraries. Understanding the nuances of the condition can go a long way in promoting empathy and challenging those misconceptions.
Yeah, knowledge is power.
And speaking of power, I think it's important to remember that we all have a sphere of influence, whether it's our family, our workplace, or our community. We can use our voices to advocate for more inclusive policies and practices.
Absolutely. And don't underestimate the impact of seemingly small actions. Something as simple as having a genuine conversation with a friend or family member who has ADHD, letting them know you're there for them, can make a world of difference. It's about showing up with empathy and understanding. As we wrap up this deep dive, I keep coming back to this idea of shifting our perspective on ADHD. What if instead of seeing it as a deficit, we embraced it as a different way of thinking and experiencing the world?
I love that. It's about celebrating neurodiversity and recognizing that the characteristics we often associate with ADHD, like creativity, out-of-the-box thinking, and a strong sense of justice, can actually be incredible strengths.
Imagine a world where those strengths were nurtured and celebrated instead of being stifled or pathologized.
That's a world I want to live in.
Yeah.
And it begins with each of us challenging our own assumptions, educating ourselves, and advocating for change.
So as we conclude this deep dive, I want to leave you with a final thought. Knowing what we now know about ADHD and its potential impact on lifespan, how can we shift our perspectives and actions to create a more supportive and inclusive world?
It's a question we should all be asking ourselves. It's about challenging those preconceived notions,
Yeah.
advocating for change, and most importantly, showing understanding and support to those who need it most.
Remember, even small acts of kindness and understanding can have a ripple effect. By fostering open communication, advocating for better support systems, and celebrating the strengths of individuals with ADHD, we can contribute to a world where everyone has the opportunity to thrive.
Well said. And remember, knowledge is power. By sharing this information, we're taking a step towards a more informed and compassionate world.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. We hope it sparked your curiosity and inspired you to take action. Remember, even small steps can create waves of change. Until next time, keep learning, keep exploring, and keep diving deep.